Utah is changing faster than at any time in our history. Our communities, our politics, our economy, and our identity are all shifting at once. And the decisions being made today will shape the next 50 years. That's why Wake Up Utah was created. A place where real conversations happen in the open. No scripts, no spin, no noise. Just clarity, courage, and truth. This is part 1 of an 8-part series exploring one defining question: who is running Utah? This is where Utah comes to think, to question, and to understand the forces shaping our future. Welcome to Wake Up Utah. And now, Episode 1.
And welcome to Wake Up Utah. My name is Trent Christensen, and together with my colleague Doug Yeaman, we welcome you to a conversation series produced by KMMU Main Street Media Utah, where we bring together thoughtful voices to explore the issues shaping Utah's future.
Our goal is simple. What we want to do is give Utah another voice. We want substantive conversations. We want to look at what are the forces that are shaping our state and how do we have influence and connection to them.
To keep the conversation dynamic, each segment will begin with a rapid response answer where one of our panelists will share their initial perspective on that topic. After that, we'll open the discussion for a moderated conversation. At the end of each segment, we'll have an action round where each panelist will give a statement or two about how we can actually take action to implement what we've been talking about. What can we as a state and we as citizens do here in Utah? We will not be editing for content, meaning everything you hear here is what we heard. We didn't take out anyone's answers. There will be no order to who is asked questions on the panel. They'll all be treated equally. And discussions are open, so all comments, debate, interruptions are acceptable, subject, of course, to the moderators. And now let's begin by introducing our panelists. First, we have Gail Ruzicka. Gail is one of Utah's most influential conservative grassroots leaders, serving as president of the Utah Eagle Forum. For decades, she has been a driving force in mobilizing activists and shaping debate on key public policy and cultural issues across the state. She also hosts a weekly radio program focused on politics, policy, and civic engagement. Rob Axon. Rob is the chairman of the Utah Republican Party, serving his second term leading the party with strategy and grassroots organizations statewide. He previously served as vice chair and state director to Senator Mike Lee, giving him deep experience in both party leadership and national politics. And Sarah Montes. Sarah Don Montes is the vice chair of the Salt Lake County Republican Party and a community leader in District 32. A math teacher, wife, and mother, she is deeply involved in local civic engagement. She is a strong defender of the caucus system and actively organizes caucus night efforts.
Rob Bishop is a veteran public servant who represented Utah's 1st Congressional District in the U.S. House from 2003 to 2021. Prior to Congress, he served over a decade in the Utah legislature, including as Speaker of the House. He is currently running to serve again in the Utah legislature. Christy Henshaw serves as the chair of the Utah County Republican Party, one of the most politically influential counties in the state of Utah. In this role, she oversees local party organizations, candidate support, and grassroots engagement. Her work places her at the intersection of local and broader party strategy in Utah. She is a local advocate. Zach Wilson has experience spanning capital markets, private equity, asset management, small business ownership, and state and local government engagement. He's run 2 political campaigns, which strengthened his ability to build coalitions and engage with the community. He is the former chair of the Utah Young Republicans.
Thank you, Doug. We'd also like to thank our live audience for participating today. This audience will function as the 7th panelist and has been invited to participate not only with their live reactions, but also by submitting questions to the panelists. If you would like to be a part of a future live audience for a Wake Up Utah taping, please go to our website, kmmu.org, and sign up. That's kmmu.org. Now, panelists, let's jump to our first topic. Who governs Utah? This is a debate about who really governs our state. Is it the voters? Is it the parties? Or is it the people in power? And what does that mean for the future of our representation, your representation in this state? Our first segment will cover the ongoing debate surrounding Proposition 4, the voter-approved initiative that was intended to shift total redistricting authority away from the legislature and vest more power in an independent commission. Efforts to repeal Prop 4 recently failed to qualify for the ballot after thousands of voters withdrew their signatures. That means, for now, the measure remains in place, but the broader political debate remains surrounding redistricting authority in Utah.
Yet it's far from settled. At its core, the controversy asks truly, who governs Utah? Should the power to draw political districts be with elected legislators or with a process voters approved? The question is, who should control and how should oversight be managed?
So, for our very first opening response, we'll go to you, Rob Axon. Rob, what should ultimately guide redistricting in Utah? Legislative authority or voter-driven oversight?
I think it's an easy answer. It's legislative authority. And the reason it's an easy answer is because our Constitution says as much. If we don't want the if we don't want the legislature to be the ones drafting the districts for races and for consideration of congressional races and even legislative races, then we need to make a change where it currently is articulated where that authority resides, and that's in our Constitution. So that is not what's happened with this independent redistricting commission that was passed narrowly back in 2018. That was the ignoring of that constitutional role has occurred through court overstep and through judicial activism. That's what we've seen over these last 18 months when our state Supreme Court decided that they were going to interpret legislative authority to be limited in the drafting of initiatives. And that's where I think there's this massive challenge, and it's where a lot of this issue has been lost for folks, is if you have initiative authority, which is an expression of the people's authority. Well, initiative authority still, once again, does not say that you have the right to ignore the Constitution. And ultimately, our elected officials are elected to represent us. And it's important that we have these folks elected to represent us because everybody in this audience, every single one of us as voters, we can hire and we can fire elected officials. An independent redistricting commission is, one, not independent. Everybody has their bias. They just claim that they don't have a bias. But more importantly, it's okay that they have a bias, but what's not okay is you can't fire them. You can fire elected officials.
Christy, tell us more. Thank you. Christy, you're nodding your head. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, I'm nodding my head. I agree. Rules matter. Both sides were citing the Constitution, one in a big blanketed statement and the other with a direct, specific allocation to those rights. And so, yeah, it's been frustrating to watch, not because I think this directly answers who governs Utah, because I think that's a little bit more complicated, but Prop 4 had such easy talking points for the left that it created so much engagement. But the problem, and this is what's so frustrating anytime you get like a large populist movement towards a single issue like Prop 4 was, is that the rules matter, and when the table turns, if you're just fighting to win, which often happens, when the tables turn, then you're just asking. We don't have any anchoring for our government. We don't have a foundation to which people can look and we can all agree. And for me, it was so black and white when you open the Constitution that it said who directly has those legislative powers. The other side was citing something more ambiguous. If you have delineated something so specifically like they did in the Constitution, then by all means, there's a process to change that. So take that process and use it. And so it was frustrating to see such easy, low-hanging fruit talking points with Prop 4. We sat in those committee meetings and would hear a lot of people admittedly, rightfully upset because they feel like they're not being heard. But if we can't go back to a certain set of rules and everybody follow those rules specifically, that's where governments devolve. And so it was frustrating. That's why I spent a lot of time on Prop 4 and was happy to do it because it was the right thing to do. And it's still a question in people's minds. But for me, this is the larger, broader question on what these two sides are fighting about. And I think we're actually fighting about fundamental systems. We're fighting for a republicanism system, which is a lowercase r, door open for everyone, whoever wants to participate. And I believe that they're fighting for pure democracy, which our founders argued against. None of them are a closed door to anybody, but they both have completely different outcomes.
It failed because people withdrew their signatures.
Right.
Talk about that.
I'll talk about that briefly, happily.
Yeah, Rob, talk about that.
And this has to be the warning sign, and we can save this for the action round of what citizens and Utahns need to do. But this has to be a wake-up call. You had $3 million spent mainly in one Senate district. It just so happened to be that it's the Senate district where I lay my head to sleep each night, which means that my neighbors who had signed, people in my community, they were having people knock their door, different people knock their door every single day. They were receiving correspondence and text message and emails. They were being inundated on a near daily basis. I know of multiple people who removed their name because they were afraid of people continuing to come to their house. And that's going to be a consequence. But the reality here is we went through the initiative process. We did the Herculean effort of in 2 months getting a record number of signatures. Normally you would have about an 11-month process to do this. We only had 2 months to do it because there wasn't a reason to do this until Judge Diana Gibson went and nonsensically ignored the Constitution. Once she did that, we instigated this process. The removal effort that the legislature had left in there in the code, and I think maybe inappropriately so, they left in this means for people to remove their name. The intention there is if somebody signed something unwillingly or they didn't know what they were signing. This was not meant to have an out-of-state $4 million funded effort to come and bully, shame, and intimidate people into removing their signatures. Now they've seen a successful route in having done this. We will see this happen time and time again here in Utah in every step of the initiative process to pass things that Utahns don't want to see passed and to intimidate people to prevent things that Utahns do want to see passed. We have to be awake to this.
Kristen, you mentioned,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Can I make a distinction? Because a lot of people don't understand this, or they will use the words interchangeably, and it's very different. Initiative versus a referendum. And so referendum all day long. It is society's, the public's ability to check their government. That is to remove a law that is bad. Initiative is a progressive movement that has been put in place to have the people create laws. So you can end up in a scenario like California where you have multiple initiatives on ballots every year. Big difference. So a lot of people say, well, the Republicans don't want the people to have a voice. No, referendum all day long. Go ahead and do that. So when people use those, I just want to make the distinction between an initiative versus a referendum.
Well, I appreciate
totally
that.
different.
And you'd mentioned something earlier. Zach, please chime in.
Speaking of California, look back to Prop 4 originally, millions of dollars flowed in support of it. $0, I believe, were spent against it, and it was 51-49. So it wasn't a situation where it was overwhelming. The whole state of Utah wanted it. It was very much
Closer than that. 7,000 votes
yeah,
separated.
50.5, 49.5, whatever it is. So anyway, I just want to add that color as
No,
well.
it's 50.3. And unfortunately, it's 7,000 statewide.
Yep.
But it passed Salt Lake County by 67,000
Yep.
and Summit by 7,000. It failed miserably everywhere else. My county was 60% against it. But the other thing about Prop 4 is we've seen what it did. I mean, I was on that wonderful independent redistricting commission that had 3 major flaws. Number one is there was no representation. The 3 Republicans were from Cache, Box Elder, and Davis. The 3 Democrats were all from the east side of Salt Lake City. There was actually no accountability. I defy anyone to know who the 7 people that actually served on that were. And worse than that, there was no intelligence. There was nobody from southern Utah there to say these are where the line should be, or central Utah, or eastern Utah, or Twilla, or Weber County. We tried to draw a line. Spanish Fork had more people than for 1 rep. So we decided, okay, where will we draw the line? And everyone was going, I don't know. By serendipity, we had one intern from Spanish Fork who said, well, this is what the road does for the community. So we did that way, and ironically, that's what the legislature had done 10 years earlier. The system created by Prop 4 does not work. It is flawed and it has failed. And
Can I say thank you to you, Rob, because you, if I recall, you came out against this publicly about how the committee was put together. And I would guess that you and I are probably, maybe Rob, the only 2 in the room that looked up every individual that was on that independent committee. And I was, it was such a play on words to call them an independent committee because it gives such a perception that it's your neighbor down the road, and it was not. It is elected. They were appointed by people in high positions. When I went through that list and looked at the backgrounds, those were some of the most politically savvy, connected people around
I was
this.
there, so you can't say that.
Except for, right, yeah. But I was, when I would talk to people, especially when we went to the Prop 4 meetings, the public meetings that we had to hold.
Oh, for the repeal.
For the repeal, and we would talk to a lot of the people who generally vote left, came out and they wanted to talk to us. They had this rosy version of the definition of an independent committee, and they literally thought that it was like, you know, like almost like a jury duty pulled out of a hat or something. And I said, have you looked up who those people were? And anyway, I was so grateful when I saw that you came out publicly against how that whole thing was set up, to show people it wasn't, you know, we weren't bypassing the People's Independent Committee. That was a politically driven appointments, and aside from you on it, I wasn't super happy with a lot of the people that were on there.
I would like to also mention something that hasn't come up. It was because of Prop 4 and the fact that we ended up in a lawsuit that we had a ruling from the Utah Supreme Court, a 5-0 ruling that literally changed our form of government by saying that the legislature, the constitutionally elected legislature, could not ever amend an initiative. That's unheard of. They have to be able to amend all laws. So based on that, the people could pass the law, and that was it. The only way that could ever be amended is to go back to the people for another initiative. That is democracy. That is not republic. And so we have lost our Republican form of government under the system we have right now.
And I wanted around that. Christy, you'd mentioned some of the talking points that were easily bantered around, and one of them was, we live in a democracy. We live in a democracy. This is how we operate in a democracy. And Sarah, I wanted to kick this one to you. If someone came to you and said, well, of course I'm going to sign it, of course I want this, we live in a democracy, what would your answer be to that?
Can I just say that I agree with all of you that the no judge or independent committee should be drawing the maps or deciding, having the ultimate decision for the maps. But I do see some good things that have come out of this. And Christy, you mentioned this, that in the news there was an article that said how great the Democrats had of their turnout at caucus. And so I'm so passionate about the caucus system that got me excited. And I feel like we could just connect that with the Democrats or any political party that has the caucus convention, that is the way to go. That is the way to get the best candidates. And even if we had a Democrat that was elected by the caucus system, I think that would be better than having a Republican that was chosen by the establishment.
Yeah, well, so I spoke at BYU a month or two ago with the Utah County Democrat chair because they have, started to mobilize somewhat. They went from having one caucus location to I think they had 7 in Utah County this time. And he's a BYU professor there and he teaches government. And I said a similar thing, a little bit different, but I said, absolutely welcome, have your people register with you, right? We've had a lot of people who have, especially in Utah County, have had maybe some other leaning proclivities, but they've stayed with the Republican Party because we were such a majority. And so basically, call your people home. The caucus convention system is everyone's. It's every single party's. It's not the Republican caucus system. It is Utah's caucus system. And so for me, when you talk about democracy versus a constitutional republic or republicanism, this is a system that I think we're fighting over. This is an ideology for a system. And so the left has often strengthened that system historically, and I invite them to do it again. Like for us, we need this system to be used on both sides. And the bigger fear is what Gail's talking about is if we try and legislate through initiatives and we do pure democracies, and then they'll start to cry for convenience, well, please let me vote on my phone. And then, we've lost all control there. And so caucus convention all the way, like with what Sarah's talking about, I want every single party should use the caucus convention system. It is republicanism.
The issue is,
Let me talk as a congressman about what this process has done. The map that the judge imposed on us has harmed Utah. So in the 1980s, when we got 3 seats, we did have an all-urban district, and it created chaos within our delegation in Utah. In 2000, the legislature rightly said we should have every district having both urban and rural parts so they would work together in Utah. We only got 4 votes back there. We have to be together. And even when I was there, and there was a Democrat in this, his most famous statement was always, I hope we're all on the same page. We did work together on the same page. What this judge has now done has made one district, once again urban, going back to the 1980s, and the rest are rural, and they will not work together. You have harmed what Utah can do for its safe just because one judge decided her draft was more important than the written language of the Constitution. This really has harmed Utah going forward. Whatever happens in the next session of Congress, we are not going to be in a better spot because of this.
I have a question. So, are we partly responsible for this outcome because of how we decided to draw the maps? So we cut Salt Lake County into 4s and gave each congressional district a piece. So is this kind of our...
I don't see it that way at all, and I've been a taxpayer in Salt Lake City for a long time. I still own property in Salt Lake City. I lived there for a long time. Salt Lake City was lucky to have 4 members of Congress so that when they had an issue, they could go back to Washington, D.C., and they had 4 people who were accountable to them. My encouragement now is that Salt Lake City, when they go to Washington, D.C. this next congressional cycle, the other 3 members of Congress should have their door absolutely locked to Salt Lake City coming in and having counsel from them at all. There's no business listening to Salt Lake City anymore, in my opinion, of these other 3 congressional offices. They shouldn't pay attention to them anymore. They are a city that wanted to be governed and represented by 1 member of Congress. Give them what they want. They can have 1 member of Congress's voice back there in Washington, D.C. I think Salt Lake City and those who claim that they were harmed by that representation, it's just not true. And there's a couple of other things. In this whole Prop 4 debate, you've had folks talk about, like, listen to the people. Well, look at the people who didn't want to listen to the people. They're the ones who spent $3 million to get people's names peeled off the ballot, disenfranchising 230,000 Utahns who signed the petition. 230,000 Utahns who signed it will not have the opportunity to see that vote happen. They've been disenfranchised. So the very folks who claim we just need to listen to the people are the ones trying to stifle the people's voices. The people who claim, hey, we just need to make sure that people are represented, they're the ones that are encouraging judicial activism that's robbing us of the opportunity of actually having representation through elected representatives. I do think that there's always a give and take, and there's going to be pushback that all of us as citizens need to give, but you do that at the ballot box. You go and you fire that person, you replace that person in your own party's nomination process through the caucus system. You go and you vote vigorously for or against people at the ballot box. You don't go and game the system through very expensive initiative processes. And keep in mind, it's only Utah, Arizona, and California. Only 3 states now that we have just unfettered initiatives that are going to happen moving forward.
We're going to enter into now this action round. Everybody has 40 seconds to discuss it. Rob, let's start.
All right. If you're going to divide up districts, divide up urban and rural so that those voices will be heard in every kind of one of those districts. That is essential. Every state that does have an independent system, they are there designed only to protect incumbents. This does not actually help the situation. We should have learned what other states are doing and do it differently than that. But urban and rural together, that's the one principle that has to be there for every congressional delegation.
Okay, so I would like to see some kind of bill be proposed that changes the referendum from the voters removing the signatures. So I think that would be very helpful. I'd like to see that.
Thank you. Zach?
I think one of the funny things inside of this, one of the goals of Prop 4 was to remove gerrymandering. I don't think you can get a more gerrymandered state right now. I don't think you could draw more gerrymander. It's the bluest of areas, and actually I'm not sure the existing representatives are conservative enough in the districts they're now in. So it's created real polarization that actually wasn't there as much before. So anyways, I'd say follow the Constitution and stick to the principles there.
Chrissy?
I've said a lot. I probably agree with Rob Bishop on this. And follow the rules. Yeah, I don't know that you can answer it one specifically, but from what I've seen, even in the state legislature, rural often does not have their needs met, their voices heard, and so yeah, there's a lot of people that want to go. Man, I listen to all those committee meetings. You know, population, all that stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go with Rob on that.
And Rob? Action item.
I think the key action item is we can't take for granted how difficult it is going to be to protect what we want to see here in Utah. So you tie yourself to those things that matter most, the Constitution. You tie your things to the systems that matter most, like what Congressman Bishop talked about of this rural and urban divide and making sure you're representing both of those citizens. You need to realize, and we need to collectively recognize, if we sit back on our laurels, this will all fall apart because there are forces that are well-funded that want to see Utah change, and they will take advantage of these systems that will allow them to do it in a way that the perception can be that they're just giving us what we want. No, they're giving us what we would never vote for, in spite of the fact that our population hasn't actually changed. They're just using the courts and big dollars to do it.
Thank you.
You know, when I heard that question about, you know, who's running Utah, who's governing Utah, actually the judges are. We are in this terrible mess because of judges. And if we're going to do something, that's what we need to do. We need to look at those judges. You know, every election you get this chance to retain judges or not retain them, and everybody just votes yes. Don't do that anymore. We need to now pay attention to those judges. We have 2 Supreme Court justices right now this year that will be on the ballot. You need to know who they are, and you need to vote no, because had they voted correctly, I mean, as I said, we had a 5-0 on what just happened with that initiative, and on unborn babies, we had 4-1. 4 of them voted to continue to kill babies, and we've had 10,000 babies die since Roe versus Wade, right here in Utah, because of those judges.
Can I add to Gail's on this about the judges? Because I think there's a Republican accountability piece that I know that the Senate understands now after going through what they've gone through. Stop confirming judges that you haven't vetted well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, panelists.
This has been part 1 of an 8-part series asking a defining question: who is running Utah? The conversations we begin here don't end here. They continue in our homes, our communities, and across the state we all share. Thank you for joining us for Wake Up Utah. We'll see you in part 2.